In February 2008, Kosovo, a small country in the Western Balkans, declared its independence. Over the years, they've gained wide recognition of their sovereignty from the international community. We sat down with President Vjosa Osmani to discuss the integration of her country into the Euro-Atlantic region, the impact of the war on Ukraine, and what it's like to be a woman in politics. I'm Yusuf Aram, and you're watching One on One. Madam President, thank you for spending time with us. And I want to sit down and talk about your participation here at this European Political Community Summit in Prague. You were here for this event, over 40 leaders, inaugural event. What are your thoughts regarding this summit, and what were the important issues that you stressed in your meetings with your counterparts?
I believe it was, as I said yesterday, an important day for our continent because it brought together 44 leaders of European countries, countries that are members of the European Union or outside of the European Union, but equally interested to discuss and find solutions to common challenges. As President Macron put it, this was a way to have a dialogue among equals, and that was extremely important because each and every one of us, countries big or small, had the opportunity to have our voice heard, to share our concerns, but also put forward solutions for the challenges that we face as a continent. And as you know, we're living some very difficult times because of the war in Ukraine caused by the Russian aggression. And of course, the war has its own ramifications that come from security to economy and energy. And of course, all these were discussed in very open discussions among leaders. And of course, we came to some conclusions which were not formalized in the sense of voting, but there was a general consensus on some of the issues, including how we can help Ukraine more, how we can increase the resilience of our societies and make them more secure, and how we can deal better and help one another in dealing with the economic and energy crisis. So generally speaking, I think it's an important new platform for more political dialogue among European countries, and it will make us stronger as a continent in dealing with the difficulties that lie ahead. Bilaterally speaking, of course, we've also had a lot of meetings. Only yesterday, I had bilateral discussions with more than 25 leaders. And of course, in these discussions, we go more deeply into what is specifically Kosovo's interest. And of course, I discussed with counterparts on how we can move ahead with Kosovo's international integration, its Euro-Atlantic integration, more specifically issues like the visa liberalization for the people of Kosovo, our application for membership in some of the international organizations, and of course, making sure that we convince as many countries as possible to support us in this path.
Kosovo is preparing for an EU membership application. Now, if Kosovo would become a candidate country, first, when would that application happen? And part of the accession process, the many chapters that Kosovo will have to complete, which ones do you expect to be the toughest?
Well, in terms of the application, our plan is to prepare the application for this year. Obviously, a lot will depend in our consultations and coordination with our partners within the European Union, because as we have seen historically, it is important that there are countries within the EU that take a leadership role in pushing forward the application of a certain country. So we're hoping for support in that regard. Secondly, when it comes to the chapters, I represent a very resilient people. We've been through a lot of difficulties and sacrifices in the past, but there was never anything that could take us away from our Euro-Atlantic vision. And no matter how hard the path, no matter how difficult the path, we will never give up on joining the European Union as well as NATO. So I can't say that specific chapters would be difficult. Nothing will be difficult enough to take us away from that path.
So you said NATO as well. Does that mean Kosovo is preparing for a NATO membership bid?
So what we're discussing right now with our allies in NATO is to start with joining Partnership for Peace as the first step towards joining NATO. And then, of course, once we join PFP, for which we're trying to build a consensus around this idea, first of all, then of course it will be much easier to then join NATO. We believe it's not only in Kosovo's interest, but also in the interest of the alliance to have as many countries from the Western Balkans join. So I strongly believe that, as NATO has confirmed in its latest summit, that it has its doors open for the countries of the Western Balkans, that the more countries join, the more peace and security in our part of the world, therefore more peace and security for the entire continent.
There's 4 countries in NATO that don't recognize Kosovo. Now, that's obviously going to be a hurdle. What is Kosovo doing to increase its international recognition, especially amongst EU members and NATO members?
We are working a lot with them bilaterally to try to convince them that there's nothing that they can lose from recognizing Kosovo. Quite the opposite. There's a lot that they can gain. They can gain a credible partner, a partner that relies and is founded on EU and NATO values, and a partner that can contribute, no matter how modest the contribution. I think it is an important contribution in peace and security around the world.
The war in Ukraine has had tremendous secondary impacts, whether it be rising inflation or energy prices, energy shortages, food shortages. How is Kosovo dealing with these issues?
Of course, Kosovo is affected the same way that many other European countries are affected. Of course, we will have problems with energy this winter, so we're trying to cope with that, making the necessary preparations so that the livelihoods, the citizens are not hurt to a great extent. At the same time, the inflation is rising, and for that reason, the government has adopted a new inflation package that is supporting families, students, the elderly, as well as public as well as private sector employees.
Russia has great influence in the Western Balkans. It has the ability to influence and impact your neighbor countries and quite possibly even elements inside Kosovo as well. Do you view this power of Russia to be able to influence your neighborhood as a national security threat?
Certainly, Russian influence is a malign influence, and it does pose a security threat to the entire Western Balkans, and I would say to the entire European continent, because as we can see from the war in Ukraine, the entire security architecture of Europe is under threat, not just Ukraine. Therefore, as President Zelensky mentioned yesterday, Ukraine is just one of the battlegrounds, the very first battleground. But in fact, we need to understand that if Russia is not stopped here, what they're asking for is for new battlegrounds. So we need to work steadily with our allies and partners to not allow Russia's intentions realized. And those intentions are clear. They want to destabilize the Western Balkans. They want new conflicts.
Serbia, your neighbor, close Russian ally, a country that has tensions with Kosovo, most recently with the implementation of issuing Kosovo license plates to northern municipalities. But this was bilaterally agreed upon. Can Kosovo and Serbia work out their problems diplomatically, or is this going to flare up into some type of conflict?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, there was already a solution, there was already an agreement, and what all we're doing is implementing those agreements that provide for reciprocity in the issue of freedom of movement, whether we're talking about ID cards or license plates. What Kosovo is doing is applying the healthiest principle out there in international relations, which is reciprocity, and something that we had agreed in Brussels many years ago. Unfortunately, Serbia keeps signing but then not implementing. And this is not about two parties creating tensions. This is a clear situation where there's one aggressor and one country that is a victim of constant attacks. In this case, Kosovo is under constant attacks by Serbia, who has clear territorial pretensions against Kosovo. So they are using Putin's playbook to try to annex Kosovo territories, but of course we will not allow them, because Kosovo has invested in its own defense capabilities, and at the same time our hard-earned freedoms are not something that we will ever give up on.
How is Kosovo's relationship today with Turkey? How's your relationship with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
I would say excellent. Both Kosovo's relationship with Turkey, as well as my relationship and our close cooperation with President Erdogan, are at a very high level, and I want to thank Turkey and the President for the overwhelming support that they have been giving to our country. We are looking into ways how we can enhance this cooperation. Of course, there is a lot of potential that has not been reached yet in many areas, from trade, from increasing investment on both areas, in between both countries, as well as looking into more cooperation in culture, in education, and so on. So we are looking forward to hosting President Erdogan to Kosovo in a visit, hopefully as soon as possible.
Would you like to see him take a more active role on West Balkan issues or mediate between Serbia and Kosovo?
I believe President Erdogan can have a very important role in convincing Vučić that the only way forward for long-term peace and stability in the Western Balkans is for Serbia to recognize Kosovo and for there to be a mutual recognition, because that's the solution that actually brings long-lasting peace. Half solutions can provide for perhaps something only mid-term, but in fact we need to work towards mutual recognition, and I believe that President Erdogan's role there is important. But at the same time, as you know, the process of negotiations or dialogue, to be more concrete, between Kosovo and Serbia is right now led by the European Union. So far, there have been many agreements that were reached. Unfortunately, the biggest problem that exists out there in this entire process is that Serbia is not implementing what it has signed. It's not honoring the agreements that it has signed and the promises that it has made. And I believe that here President Erdogan can play an important role in convincing Serbia to keep its promises.
Being a woman in politics, being a woman head of state, is that an advantage or a disadvantage for you diplomatically?
It's being a woman, it's an advantage. It makes you understand problems better, approach them in a way towards finding better solutions, more sustainable solutions. It makes you more understandable towards other parties. It's easier to try to put yourself in other people's shoes. So it creates a much better environment for more understanding with everyone that you speak. And I think it's very important that as women, we as statistically proven, when women are at the table in peace processes, in dialogue processes, solutions are more easily reached, solutions that contribute to peace, that are more sensitive towards the rights and especially human rights of the citizens that we represent, more approachable when it comes to social issues, the most acute problems that concern our citizens, the citizens that we represent. So all in all, the conclusion is the more women in politics, in high-ranking positions, in decision-making powers in the world, the better and more peaceful the world will be.
Vyasa Osmani, thank you for joining us on One on One.
Thank you very much. Çok teşekkürler.
Ben teşekkür ederim.